Welcome to those who are joining us on YouTube, both right now or if you're viewing this later on. Still loading, or it shows that it's still loading. And now we're going to YouTube. So thank you again, everyone. And I will be turning it over now to Allison, who will start our meeting officially.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Nice to see you this sunny and warm August. So glad you all are here and very excited to introduce a little bit later on Gerard Collins, who has been working with us on digitizing some of the oral histories. So we're excited to have this presentation. Also, a few announcements is for those that may have not heard, is we have hired a new curator. Carlos Ortega started yesterday virtually, and today was his first day on site. Very excited to have him. He brings an amazing wealth of experience. He's very much about storytelling and telling people stories. He has experience with exhibit design and installation, collections management, archives. He's going to be a wonderful asset to the site, so we're thrilled to have him on board. And he's open to questions and comments. I would just ask that maybe you give him a couple days to kind of assimilate into the culture, but he definitely wants to work with all of our wonderful volunteers and our staff, so we're just thrilled. He does share an office with Alfred, so if you know where that is, it's in the north wing by the handicap accessible wheelchair ramp. So that's where he is. We're thrilled to have him on board. So, when you have a chance, come by and say hello. And he'll be walking the site and learning more about the collections and the archives and everything we have going on. So thank you for joining us, Carlos. Also, I know there's been a lot of speculation about what's been happening in the backyard. We have this now beautiful pergola with a couple lovely chairs underneath it, a wonderful vase, if you will, because I'm blanking on the correct term. And what this is we have revamped our donor recognition program. And so we have a variety of gifting opportunities. And Margie and Frank Newell, who have given substantially to the site, they named their gifting opportunity for the backyard. And so we built what was something we've always wanted to do, but never really had the funds to do. But with their giving throughout the years, we were able to do it, is to recreate the historic rose garden that used to be over near under the Morton Bay fig by the cypress. But over time, as the trees made it too shady, and so we've always wanted to move that historic rose garden. And so with Marie's expertise and help, we found a new location. And we are planting roses that would have been there back in the 1930s. It's going to take us some time to do that because you want to get it right. And we need to get roses when they're in season. But right now we do have this beautiful pergola with the chairs. And so we hope you come back and enjoy that area. And I know Krista may share some, or Marie may share some more information later on in the gathering, but that is what that is. So we invite you to enjoy it, get used to it, and also to help us talk about our gifting opportunities for the Opening Doors campaign. And then also I wanted to say thank you to everyone that came out to our golf outing and our welcome back dinner. It was a tremendous fundraiser for the site, and we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. But thank you all. It was a fantastic in-person event after, 15 months now of not being able to meet in person. It was just a lovely vibe and atmosphere for the evening. So thank you for all that came and or supported the event. And we're looking to more events as we move forward into the future. So thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. looking forward to Gerard's comments later about his work. And with that, I believe I am turning it over to Megan.
Hi, everyone. Thrilled to have y'all here. Thrilled to be back. I just returned from vacation last night and was at the Rancho this morning and here tonight. I want to introduce our featured presenter tonight. His name is Gerard Collins. He is the LA Subject Resident Archivist at CSU Dominguez Hills. He holds an MLIS, that's a library science degree from San Jose State, and a BA from USC. It's a lot of letters. Let me tell you what else he does in addition to CSUDH resident archivist. He has worked at the Pasadena Public Library, the Writers Guild Foundation Library and Archive, the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, Hendrick Library, and he also lives in Burbank with his wife and their 2 cats. Tonight, he's going to tell us all about his experience digitizing a really important portion of the Rancho Los Cerritos oral history collection as part of his residency program. He plans to focus on the planning and preparation that went into the project, how the recordings were selected, what was entailed in the process itself of digitizing the recordings, and how he helped collect and create the metadata records to make the recordings findable online. And he's even going to tell you where you can find them. I know that's going to be of great interest to many of our living history volunteers and everyone else who just loves the Rancho and learning about its history. During the presentation, please put your questions into the chat, whether you're viewing on Zoom in this webinar or streaming it through YouTube. Put your questions into the chat as they occur to you so you don't forget them. And you can even use the Q&A if you prefer, but he will address them after the formal presentation. This will be about 20 minutes or so, and then time for questions and answers. Gerard, it's all up to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for having me this evening. Let me share my screen really quickly here. And there we go. So yeah, thank you. Let me start with a quick caveat that I'm a archivist, not a historian. I was pretty new to a lot of the information in the archives here at the Rancho Los Cerritos and in the oral history collection. And you all probably know way, way, way more than I do or ever will about the history of the Rancho and of Long Beach and about the stories of the people who've lived and worked here. So I'd be a fool to try to share what I discovered in the oral histories. So as Megan said, I'm here tonight to talk a little bit more about what was involved in digitizing a selection of those oral histories, what the goals were, what decisions we made, how close we came to what we set out to accomplish, and to share what we managed to pull together despite the unanticipated challenges of last year. So I wasn't really on a treasure hunt as much as I hope to make the map a little bit easier to use for those who came hunting later. My objective was to try and work a bit with how the recordings were already organized and maybe tweak and clean the information up a little bit if needed, and to digitize the selection in order to improve access and discoverability and to maybe, whet people's appetites a little bit, if you will. But let me start with a little bit of background. LA Subject, a lot of you probably know it through the Archives Bazaar that's held every year. Apparently it's going to be a hybrid event, and so part of it will be at USC this year. But for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's about 230 plus institutions with material related to the history and culture of Los Angeles. And in 2018, LA Subject received a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, to hire 3 resident archivists to work with members who had an interest in digitizing collections. The hubs for those residents were going to be at their home institutions of CSUDH, which is where I work, Cal State Northridge, and USC. And we would each be hoping to work with 10 member sites each, so 30 in total, spanning from 2019 through 2021. And Rancho Los Cerritos was selected for collaboration after applying during the second round. And we, let's see here, started brainstorming with some ideas of what collection to focus on. Some of the criteria we wanted were something that would be of manageable size. So we could either complete a collection in full or at least complete a selection from beginning to end. We didn't want to come up with a project that was going to have 5 phases, and then at the end we'd have a bunch of stuff that was all stuck in phase 1. We wanted to at least have some completed material to give an idea of what the complete collection would look like. The goal was also to pick items that would improve visibility and accessibility. So what items were unknown or underutilized, and what would benefit from being digitized and put online. What maybe were materials that were difficult to access otherwise, or perhaps in a fragile state that needed more, that would benefit from being digitized. And there was also the goal of trying to do it on site with existing or easily acquired resources. This would minimize the need for specialized equipment or software, and it would also mean the possibility of continuing independently. So I could help to fashion some tools to be able to do this, and then maybe it could be carried on past my participation. And so working with Sarah Fitzgerald, we settled on the oral history collection. When we first met and discussed it, there was an initial count of a little over 150 interviews, spanning 102 cassettes and 72 open reels and 6 CDs. And the issue was that there was no real way to play any of the tapes at the Rancho. So if researchers were aware of the collection, there was no way for them to actually hear any of the oral histories or to otherwise access them. There were some transcripts, but not for all of the interviews. So, that was another thing to have under consideration of maybe doing some transcripts. The last inventory was from 2002, so it was almost 18 years old and not very detailed. So there was definitely the opportunity to improve visibility and accessibility. So check that box. And looking at the size of the collection, we knew we couldn't do the whole thing, but we could get something started and we could see some things through to completion. And then we began to map out a schedule where we would begin in April or May and then continue through the summer. And if those of you who know what happens next can keep it to yourself. We don't want to spoil it for anyone. Yeah, COVID. So we had met, I think, in mid-March and decided we were going to start working. And then I was sent home and told to work from home. And then I know the Rancho was closed. And so time continued to pass. But I checked in repeatedly with Sarah just to see how things were going, where we were at. We started to figure out what the next steps could be. And as slowly I was able to go back to campus and work a little bit at a time, and she was able to work at the Rancho a little bit, we started to coordinate to figure out a time when maybe I could go there and have access to the collection. And if nothing else, what I wanted to focus on was doing the inventory. There are several reasons for that. I can show you now. There we go. This was what the existing inventory looked like. And it's fantastic that this even existed. Most collections don't even have this much information. But if I go into the detail a little bit, you can see we have a list of names, but we don't have that much information about the rest of the collection. Like, you can see it says it's a reel or it's a cassette, but it doesn't tell me how many reels or how many cassettes, how long is the interview, when was it conducted. We've got some names are repeated, some names are, we can see like Andrews and Mitchell, were they interviewed together? Are they two separate interviews on the same tape? So I wanted to focus on let's start with an inventory and see if we can do that, and we can build from there. So the objective in that then was to make sure it was everything accounted for. Had anything been added to the collection since this last inventory? Had anything been overlooked? Was there anything physically present that was not accounted for? Is everything where it's supposed to be? And if not, where is it? So we could have some sort of control to make sure that everything is paired up where it's supposed to be and discoverable. And also, is there anything else we should know? Is there anything to note about the format of the recordings? Anything about the condition that we can tell just by observing them? Notes on boxes or in folders, anything that would be of useful information so we can start planning on actually doing the digitization. And So even though we were digitizing, there's still a lot of stuff done by hand. These are a couple of forms that I came up with to try and start to get a sense for, at least myself, the scope of how much there was. Can go into a little detail here. The one on the left is just really a list. We kind of assigned a serial number, a tape ID number to every recording. There was no real order to it. It was just to make sure that everything had a sort of unique ID, and I could tell, rather than just a name of, say, Alfred Valenzuela. Okay, how many tapes? Well, I know which tapes and I know where they are. And the other form was kind of broken into a couple of parts. The top, it was just to record when I did the inventory, but also where is it located. So in this case, it was in the Bixby archival material and which box it was in, so that if we went looking for the original recording, we could find it, who the subjects were, in this case, Concepcion and Manuel Liera, who conducted the interview, when it was recorded, is there an existing transcript, is there a release or not, was one signed at the time of the recording. And the other section was just a way to quickly capture as much information as we could about the tapes themselves. So in this case, it was a cassette, and it was a 60-minute long cassette. Gave me an idea of how long the interview would be. Just similar criteria for the open reels, a little bit more information there. Was it original? Was it a duplicate? Were there any notes on the envelope? Anything that needed to be taken into account that would, again, give us some idea of what would be on the recording? And as I was collecting all this information, I started putting it into there's a website called Airtable, which is a relational database that is available online. And it's a little bit more robust than an Excel spreadsheet would be. And I apologize if this type is very tiny. It's just sort of the nature of that screenshot, but it's just a way to show that I try to show the connections between everything, so that if there was, say, a particular person who was interviewed, we could show all the ways, all the formats that those interviews were recorded, or if they were interviewed multiple times, we could show where they all connect to. Here's another view of that. I just have the recording ID for everything, and it just ties into who is the oral history, who was interviewed, which identification is it, what's the tape ID, what's the format. So I was collecting a lot of information to get an idea of what we had. And once we had that, it came down to the question of selection and what we were going to digitize. So this is something I worked with in consultation with Sarah to come to with these decisions. The first were the technical limitations. Doing cassettes and CDs would be relatively easy. The open reel tapes are going to be a more complex issue. I didn't have an open reel tape player available to me at Dominguez Hills. There were still restrictions at this point last summer in working with some of the other universities, either USC or CSUN, which had been an original thought that we might be able to do. And we still had issues with businesses being closed and everything, at least as far as trying to source an open reel machine. So we decided to put those on the back burner for the moment, and we'd focus on cassettes and CDs. But there were a lot of oral histories, there were a lot of cassettes, so we wanted to prioritize. And so it was a question of significance to Long Beach history, significance to the Rancho Los Cerritos history, and Sarah's broad direction to me basically boiled down to anything with these families is who we wanted to hear from. So anybody who was a Bixby or a Dudley or Liera or a Coronado, let's focus on those and let's try to get those first. So what we then moved into is starting to look at actually doing the digitization. Like I said, we wanted to try to do something where it would be not too expensive or not too technically difficult. It could be fairly straightforward. So what we wound up using was this Ion Tape Express cassette player, which is basically, if you're old enough, you remember a Walkman. And this is basically a Walkman with a USB output. So it would create a digital file on the fly that we could record straight to the computer. And we didn't use the software that came with it. I'm going to talk about the software that we used, but this was just a really inexpensive solution. When I found this, it was a $40 item on Amazon. I checked earlier today, it's down to $30. So it was a relatively inexpensive solution. Needed a laptop. In this case, I used the MacBook Pro that I'm actually on right now and that I use for work, but any laptop would have worked. USB cable, and headphones. So nothing too out of the ordinary as far as what we were going to use for hardware. For software, I already mentioned Airtable that worked for the inventory. It was free up to a certain point. I think you can have something like 5,000 records before it starts charging you. So we were definitely under the cap on that. And as I said, it's a relational database, so it's a bit more robust than Excel or Google Sheets would be. So what we used to actually record the tapes was an application called Audacity, and you can see the link on there. It's free, it's open source and cross-platform. So it works on Macs and PCs, it works if you run Linux. It's actually it's a little technical, but it's actually great for a free program. There's a lot of support out there and problem solving. It's easy to create and handle multiple formats, and I'm going to get to that in just a second about why we needed multiple formats. And it also offered fairly basic but useful editing and equalization for creating access copies, which meant we wouldn't have to then open it up in another program. We could actually do some work in that and make it part of the workflow. And then for the CDs, if you've ever ripped a CD, we just used iTunes, or you could use Apple Music now on newer Mac, or Windows Media Player, also free, would have worked just as well on a PC. So again, we try to keep those expenditures and low, and also use things that were readily available. And the technical specifications, and this is getting a little wonky, so I'll try to go through them, but the two authorities that I consulted, first is what's known as FADGI, the Federal Agencies Digital Guidelines Initiative, which is set up by the US government on how US agencies are supposed to digitize their materials. It just kind of has become a default standard in digital archiving. Almost everyone refers to FADGI guidelines. So we use that as a starting point. And the CSUDH project, the CSU Japanese American Digitalization Project, which is something that is housed here at CSUDH, had already done some work on establishing guidelines for digital recordings. So these two gave a clear idea of what we should do as far as the technical settings. So for creating archival copies, we created WAV files, which are uncompressed audio files, bit depth of 24 bits, sample rate of 96,000 or 96 kilohertz, recorded in stereo just to make sure that we captured everything. And then for access copies, just a regular MP3 that you would find, anywhere. 16-bit, 44 kilohertz, creates a radically smaller file that is going to be much easier to put online and to stream and to listen to. So the waves exist and are available if anybody wanted to try to do a cleaner edit or maybe clean up the audio quality a little bit. I will say the audio quality is what it is. I mean, these things were not recorded in a studio, so they were often recorded in somebody's home. There's a lot of background noise or fans or things like that. So it's as good as it's can be, and in some cases that's remarkably good. But that's where if somebody wanted to try to clean these up a little bit more, they could use the WAV file. I did a little bit of fixing, and we did create access files using MP3s. And those are actually what are going to be on the digital collection that I'm going to show you a little bit later. So, and this is a screenshot of Audacity, just a quick idea of what it would look like. Just as you record, it creates this waveform. You can see what you've got. It gives you a timestamp. And I could go into more detail, but there are plenty of tutorials online if you want to learn how to use Audacity. It's a pretty easy thing to get started with. And like I said, there's a lot of support out there for it. And this is just a shot of what the setup was working in the archives. Not too complicated, not too, maybe not too sophisticated, but it worked. And it was just a matter of going through and recording these things one by one. I had to digitize the tapes in real time. So if it was a 60-minute cassette, it was full from beginning to end. It took 60 minutes at least to digitize it. There's no shortcut on that. And then once we digitized it, once we created the WAV file, I saved everything to an external hard drive as a backup. I also backed it up online to Dropbox. And then we created an MP3 file to make accessible. Did it at the same time. It's just a matter of having everything in the workflow. And once we had created the digital files, it was a question of the metadata, which is data about data. It's describing the data. If you have a document or a photograph, you can take a glance at it and tell what it is. When you have a digital file, shy of opening it up and listening to the whole recording, you need some way of knowing what it's about. And we wanted to capture that information as well. So we started with pulling whatever was already noted in documentation in the folders or had been noted on the tapes or on the boxes. So who was interviewed, who conducted the interview, when did it take place, and then other information from listening to the interview. So people who were referred to or discussed, places that people talked about, obviously the Rancho Los Cerritos, but other ranchos, other locations in and around Long Beach. Events, obviously the 1933 earthquake came up a lot. A lot of people had firsthand stories about surviving that. And then common subjects, things that came up. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank Catherine Ong for creating the summaries and listening to those recordings and coming up with keywords and kind of a quick thumbnail sketch of what some of these recordings were about. It came in really handy when we actually created the metadata records. And let's see. We also did the transcripts. So as I said, well, here we go, let me back up. Some of the recordings already had transcripts. And in this case, this is one from the Liras. I was able to just capture these with my phone and create, then once I had all the photos, I was able to put them into Adobe Acrobat and do optical character recognition, and we could scan it and basically have a working transcript again. That was pretty straightforward. That was pretty easy. There weren't transcripts in existence for all of the recordings yet, though. So for those, I used Office 365 Online. This is a handy trick in case anybody doesn't know about it, but there is a transcribe option in Word Online. And if you upload an audio recording, it will create a transcript. Which saved a lot of time. On the other hand, if you have ever asked Siri to do something or Alexa or anybody, you know that it doesn't always hear what you said. So there is still quite a bit of going through and cleaning it up and changing sound-alike sounds and words and wondering exactly where it got tripped up. And as I said, the original quality of some of the recordings were not always the greatest of environments. There's one where there's a TV on in the background through the whole thing. So the voice recognition gets a little bit confused in that case, but it did save a lot of time instead of having to go and type everything out from scratch. And by creating the transcripts, it makes it searchable. Someone is looking for a term that we didn't capture in the metadata. They can search through that. If the audio recording is too difficult to hear, you can always read the transcript. So that actually became really important in terms of accessibility of making sure that we had that as whenever we could. So then once we've got the audio recordings, we've got the transcript, we've got all the metadata. Here at CSUDH, we use a system called Content DM. That's a content management system. And everything is uploaded to it. You can see, again, I apologize for the small print. The screenshot is what it is. But we have got separate, basically separate records for all of the oral histories. So in each of these, if there are multiple recordings, they are present in there along with the transcript, along with all of the description about what is discussed, keywords, people's names, everything. So everything was uploaded, we processed it and indexed it, and we come to this, which is the actual digital collection. It's part of the LA Subject collection here at the CSUDH Digital Collections. And if I click on this, hopefully it will work. This should take us live to the page. So hopefully if somebody could nod and tell me that this is visible, cool. You can see here we've got a few selected oral histories here at the top, a link here to the oral history collection page, a little description about what the collection's about, and then information about Rancho Los Cerritos, and a link to Rancho Los Cerritos here at the bottom. So everything is credited back to the Rancho, and this is gives a chance for people to kind of get an idea of what this was about. We also have information, you can see here, about the LEA subject project and the residency and all of that. So with that, I can take you then in here and show you the collection itself on Content DM. We have, right now there are 12 oral histories up online. There should be, I think, 4 or 5 more that are still being processed. Those should go up, at least the recordings will go up, I think, very shortly. It's the transcripts that are taking a little time. But if you wanted to click on any of these, you can actually, you can see over here, we have different subject headings that were discussed. Gives you a count. It tells you, like in this case, Virginia Country Club, there are at least 7 recordings that discuss the Virginia Country Club, Pacific Electric Railway, things like that. And if we click on any one of these, you can see here, up here, it'll play the recording in the browser. It's just got to load here for a second, so give it a second. And if you played it, I can try and play it. I don't know if the audio will work. Don't know if anyone is, no audio? Okay, trust me, it's there. But that's, again, in case there's any issue with playing back or anything, here we have the full transcript of the whole interview in a PDF format. In this case, it's 29 pages long. Scroll through it, you can search. We've got, again, it's a combination of doing the automatic voice recognition, but also cleaning it up a bit. So that's accessible. And can always go back to the results, back to the collection, and just pick on another one. There's one instance here where we didn't have I couldn't find the recording. I don't know what happened to that one, but we did have a transcript, so we just included the transcript, especially because it's Concepcion Liera, and there were several other recordings with her and her husband, so wanted to make sure that that was in there as sort of a making that complete. And let's see, let me go back to my presentation here. Oh, in fact, actually, I do want to go back. Forgot to show. Here we also have in the recordings, we've got the subject headings, which again, if you click on any of these, they'll take you to show you any other recordings that have got similar subject headings. People, these are both the subject of the interview, but also any people who are discussed in the course of the interview. We've got the date it was recorded, who the contributor is, the person who conducted the recording. So we've got all this information here, and also directs if there are any questions about reusing or duplicating the material to contact Branchula Cerritos. And so I wanted to just bring up issues because no project goes perfectly according to plan. And some of the stuff that kind of cropped up along the way that became some areas of concern that if we had more time and more resources that maybe we could have addressed. But, you know, we had the issue of equipment, especially for open reel tapes. That was a difficult thing to source. It might not have been as difficult were we not in the pandemic, but it became a problem just in terms of trying to find something that could play back some of the tapes that were there that were definitely of interest, would have fit in the scope of digitizing this. The condition of some of the tapes, unfortunately, tapes fall apart like other physical media. Some of the tapes probably do need an audiovisual conservator. I was very clear with Sarah when I started, is like, I'm not qualified to repair tapes and I wasn't going to try. So if something could play and I could digitize it, that would be what I would do. But, you know, some of these tapes may have information, interviews that are important and need to be captured, and definitely worth maybe working with a vendor or someone who has more experience in handling those materials. And the biggest issue was time. We had delays due to the work from home order. We lost maybe 5 months because of that. And I had limited access to the collection. in terms of when I could work and when Sarah worked and when I could have access to the collection. It was about 4 hours at a time, 1 day a week. And obviously the original plan would have been to be embedded for a little bit longer, for longer durations of time, to be able to capture as much as possible. So we were only able, like I said, to do about 16, 17 recordings, oral histories that we would have liked to maybe have done more. But we had to call it at some point and do the rest of it to make sure it was presentable. And so what's left and what's next steps, there are still plenty of remaining cassettes that need to be digitized. Maybe not as high profile or in demand as like the Bixby's and the Lieras, but definitely items that could be sort of low hanging fruit that could be addressed. The open reels obviously still need to be digitized. That might be something to consider a vendor for. That was a question as well about, was it worth trying to track down a reel-to-reel tape player, and what would be the use of it after these were digitized? Maybe the cost would be better spent on having a vendor do it. Transcriptions are still obviously an ongoing concern. I think they're, again, making them accessible. Even if people don't want to listen to the recordings, I'm sure people would be interested in reading the transcriptions. It makes things a lot easier to search for. And then I know there are always questions of grants, further funding. My hope is that with this start of a collection, gives a bit of a roadmap on how to continue it, and that might be of use in getting funding to continue it and to do similar projects in the future. So who knows? Hopefully that is what might lay ahead. But that was really all I had. I hope that was of interest. I hope I didn't get too far in the weeds about some of the technical issues. And please, by all means, go to the website and check out the digital collection, listen to the recordings, read the transcripts. Hopefully you're going to enjoy them. They're interesting to hear, little snippets of Rancho history recorded back in the 60s and 70s and up into the 90s. So if any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, we have a few. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for explaining to us what you did. I had known a little bit about it, but certainly not the full range of what you presented tonight. Why don't we start there with the Cal State Dominguez site? Does that track how people or who's using these collections, or whether they're cited in any academic papers? Do you have any knowledge of whether they've been accessed?
That's a good question. I don't. There might be some level of sort of tracking usage somewhere within the sort of the systems librarian realm. It's not something that we specifically have that information in the archive. That's sort of a question of user privacy and confidentiality as well. So we don't necessarily want to track who's using it and how it's getting cited, but there are certainly warnings that all the material should be cited, and that permission should be sought before using it. It's there for research purposes, not just free for anybody to take and do whatever they want with.
And then related to that, in the beginning, you had listed things and it said release. And I was personally wondering, is that like a photo release that people have said that their oral history transcript or words themselves could be publicly available?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's just acknowledging that the recording is being done and would be available for research purposes. The thing is, obviously, no one back in 1968 signed a release for online distribution. So what the release is, on the other hand, many of the people who've been interviewed are deceased. So there are sort of a question of how comfortable you are with having things online. The policy for a lot of the digital collections at Dominguez Hills are, if it seems like it's fair use, if it seems like it's a reasonable thing to share, we'll put it online. If anyone has an objection, it will be taken down. So if a family member or someone says, I don't like that up there, or I think there's a problem with that, or or even if somebody who was interviewed is perhaps still alive and doesn't want that up there, there's a mechanism to have it taken down. But in some of the gray area cases, it's easier to just, act first and ask for forgiveness later.
And most of these are from the 50s and 60s, right? Where somebody else was wondering if you saw any trends of who was interviewed or who did the interviews or when these interviews took place.
Oh, yeah. I think Loretta Berner showed up quite a bit as doing interviews.
Conducting them as well.
Conducting them, yeah. There's actually she has an address to docents, which is actually a really interesting recording because she talks about sort of how the oral history project began and sort of the mistakes she made at the beginning. There's one point where she says, I'm sorry to whoever has to type that stuff up because of all the mistakes I made. And I was like, Loretta, you have no idea. But it's a great thing to have. But yeah, the interviewer, the people who are conducting the interviews should be, if I knew who it was, if I could identify them, they're listed in the metadata. So you can see who conducted the interviews as well.
And did there seem to be a reason that they were conducted? Was looking for some piece of history, or was it Rancho knowledge in general? Or
I think it was a lot of it because we focused on those families. I think it was people who had lived in or had firsthand experience of living in the rancho. So like the Coronado family had lived in it before the 1931 was it 1931, the early 30s remodel, when it was bought back and fixed up. So it kind of goes up to the last family who lived in there. But yeah, it was really, I think, just who had experience in and around the rancho primarily, and some stuff about Long Beach history, early Long Beach as well.
And then somebody asked for the recordings from that tenant period, 1900 or 1890 to 1929. Do you have any idea of how many hours of tapes there are that are transcribed or not transcribed? This is going beyond probably what you were able to do.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. That's a good question. I wasn't able to tally up sort of what would be left over in terms of how many hours. And it's hard to say because sometimes where there's just a recording and a name, but I don't know what the content is or what the questions asked were or what the scope of the interview was. So I'm sure there are recordings where a lot of that is discussed, but I couldn't say for certain.
And so then jumping into what you did transcribe or listen to, tell us some things that you learned that you thought were really interesting or really odd.
There is an odd fixation on quicksand. I know, yet everyone seemed to have a story about there being quicksand, and there were patches of quicksand and horses getting caught or buggies getting turned over in quicksand. That was sort of strange. I know with the interviews with the Coronado sisters, there were stories about them finding gold coins in the walls of the rancho. What I loved is apparently their mom would give them a nickel for every gold coin that they found. Yeah. And just sort of, that trend of, as the rancho kind of fortunes waxed and waned, sort of the rancho itself sort of waxed and waned. It was a central location and it kind of slowly petered out. And I think, as I said, by the end, it was really just kind of almost squatters in there, which is kind of hard to believe when you see it now.
Fascinating. Marie filled in that a lot of these oral histories were conducted by a city librarian named Roberta Nichols.
Mm-hmm.
And a volunteer, Marcia, said she's heard about this quicksand issue as well. And somebody reminded us that not everyone knows who Loretta Berner was, but on one hand, her descendant, I think her granddaughter, is now studying some stuff at the rancho, but she was a local historian who also grew up on part of the ranch lands in the 19 teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, very young, very long ago. Somebody asked or no, somebody told us that they have a reel-to-reel recorder device.
Oh, great.
Actually, it's Alana's dad. He seems to have everything. I think it's Alana's dad. Anything else? What do you think the next important steps are in this project? If you could just offer your advice.
Oh, there is still so much in there, I think, that would be of interest. I wish I had more time to have worked on it. It was just, unfortunately, we had to wrap it up and move on. And also knowing Sarah was leaving, we were trying kind of working under that deadline as well, to at least have something sort of at a certain point before then. But it'd be great if somebody else could go in there and just sort of pick it up and continue to run with it, and just to keep digitizing stuff and creating the transcripts and adding to the collection. I think the problem with media like this is that as it becomes obsolete, we created these things were created at a time we thought, of course, everyone's going to have a tape recorder. Everyone has a tape recorder. Everyone will always have a tape recorder. We can play these things back, and they're sitting there and they're not being played. And I think people don't know that they exist. And it's that burden of kind of finding a way to play them back is a challenge, and it's an obstacle, and kind of making this easier and creating a digital surrogate that people could listen to instead, or a transcript that can be read, makes all this stuff, come alive again. It's like reading it or hearing it for the first time.
I know a lot of our three volunteers who play characters from the Tennant era, the Lieras or Coronados, listen to the transcripts as well as, listen to the audio as well as read the transcripts, because they say it makes a world of difference hearing the Lieras talk in their own voices, using their own mannerisms and so forth.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing doing transcripts, is you want to make the transcript very readable, but there is definitely a quality to how people express themselves and how they phrase things and their cadences and their tone of voice. And you can tell when they're joking and when they're being serious or when they're being contemplative. And I think listening to the recordings is still, I would encourage anybody to do it, just at least to kind of get a feel for who the people are. It gives you an idea of how they tell that story.
Fantastic. And Alana put the link into the chat. So thank you, Alana.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Gerard, thank you so much for making this presentation tonight. How interesting to learn something about the Rancho and its collections that many of us were unaware of, or certainly not in the depth that you have brought it to our attention this evening. Really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. It was a pleasure working on the collection.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for being with us. Krista, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, guys. So I wanted to share my screen real quick because I have some photos from the event that just happened on the 31st. We had our golf outing and our welcome back dinner. So right there on the screen is that new rose arbor that was unveiled at the welcome back dinner that Allison mentioned, and you can see the Newell family there enjoying it. So next time you're at the Rancho, head out into the backyard and sit under those new trees, or under the new arbor and what will soon be roses. And then I've also, the other thing that was unveiled at the welcome back dinner is the 2-story living room. So I took some photos that night, so you can see there, if you look to the right, you'll see that kind of white line in the paint of the wall. And if you'll remember, that is where the 1870s parlor exhibit space used to be. And so now they're working on restoring that wall to its original paint color, that sort of brown color. And then Mill Rock Construction also had some hardware they're working on restoring in the room for people to see. And so right there in the back, that is Georgia and Hyra from Mill Rock Construction, who were there to talk about their reconstruction work. And if you come During our public hours, we've still got, you can kind of peek into the room and see the finishing touches being put on it. And it was a lovely evening to celebrate and welcome you guys back. It was nice to be able to see you guys in person again. We had 212 RSVPs. We had a lot of yummy food from Virginia Country Club, and it was just really nice to celebrate and see some people back at the Rancho, have some more life in the Rancho. As far as fundraising goes, I just want to say, thank you so much, because we had a very successful night. I think we grossed, we don't have quite the final number, but we grossed $65,000. And so that's going to help us with our Opening Doors campaign, and as we just continue to improve the Rancho and create more access to new spaces. And then there is a final shot, so you can see the backyard, just see how it was full of life. I will stop sharing the pictures. But yeah, again, I just want to say thank you to the volunteers who came. It was so nice to see you guys. And also thank you to our volunteer committee, Kathy, Frank, and John, for putting on the event. Thanks to your guys' support, we're just able to continue opening doors and providing those new museum and educational experiences to people. Okay, and now I'll pass it over to Ilana, who will talk about summer camp.
Hi, everyone. Speaking of the backyard being full of life, we just concluded 5 weeks of summer camp, which was a total whirlwind of an experience. It was so wonderful seeing kids back on site again, having fun, hopefully learning a little bit about the history as well. So we did 2 sessions of nature camp, 2 sessions of vaquero camp, and then 1 session of our middle school camp, which we like to call unplugged, because they're getting unplugged from their tablets and phones and those kinds of devices. Things were a little bit different this year because of COVID, so we did reduce the numbers. We kept the kids in pods. We had to have air hugs instead of normal hugs, and everyone was masked, and we tried to stay as distant as possible while seated and while we were around people, but the same fun spirit of historical inspiration and just fun in general, I think still prevailed this year. And I do have a short video that I will share, it just with some of the pictures and videos from the experience. And then if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, and then I'm happy to answer those. But just in general, it was a great experience, and looking forward to having a break and then having camp again next year. So I'll just get this shared, and I will share my sound as well. So here we go.
clues. I see something. Oh, coins! You found the missing coins! Congratulations! You did it! You will not go to jail today!
So that was camp in 4 minutes. I did one thing that might not have made sense because I forgot to say it ahead of time was with the middle schoolers on the last day, we did an escape room. And so if you've done an escape room, there's usually a story and you're locked in a space and you have to get out. And so we did it outdoors. So it was an imaginary room, but it was Jotham Bixby's all of Jotham Bixby's coins had gone missing, and he suspected the sheep shearers, since they're, you know, a traveling bunch and maybe not to be trusted. And so they got locked up and had 35 minutes until the sheriff was arriving from Los Angeles, and they had to find the coins and some evidence that would show who had actually taken them in order to not go to jail. So they all solved it, which was really cool. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun, definitely an unforgettable experience, which camp always is, but then with the added layer of COVID and all of that. So I didn't notice any questions, but if you have any, I'll still be in the chat, and then I'm going to turn it over to Marie.
Kudos, Alana.
Kudos to Alana. It was really one of the best camp experiences I've witnessed over the years. So truly, congratulations. One of the other experiences that we've been seeing is how many of our wonderful wayfinders and volunteers who are here during open hours are stuck outside. And they're looking at it, they're going, wow, I've really never noticed this spot before. And I've heard comments where I've sat on the back veranda now for several months, and do you know this garden is different every week? And many of these wonderful people have said, I think I would like to be a garden docent. Well, with COVID, they said, all right, let's see if we can't do garden docent training virtually. So after they resuscitated me, they said, okay, we're going to do this. And occasionally my eyes still roll back in my head. Just give me a moment. But we are actually going to attempt a 6-week garden docent training class. The first 5 weeks will be virtual, and they finally actually get to actually see and touch the plants in my presence on the last week. This whole project will start, if you are interested in becoming a garden docent, this will start a week from tomorrow. And it will be running virtually. We'll do it live from 10 to 12 on Wednesday mornings. But if you're not available on Wednesday morning at the time, it will be recorded. So you can then watch it at your leisure. So that's Marie's big job right now, is pulling this off. And in the event that you're interested, by all means, contact me or Laura, and we'll be happy to figure out how to get you signed on. And then if you, of course, ever, anytime you have questions, you know where to find me at the Rancho or online. So that's what I have to say. Who do I turn it over to, Megan? Laura. You're up, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Yes, you can sign up for garden docent training on Volgistics, and we have 10 people already taking the class that are new to being garden docents, and 1 person auditing and 1 person who signed up to do it as a refresher. So we're really happy with that output, but there's still room if there's more people that want to take this maximally flexible way to take garden docent training. So I hope to see more of you. I think it'll be really exciting. Marie's gone to a lot of work making this manual digital, and it'll be a great thing for you that everybody who signs up will be sending it to you. So you can do it all online. And so now we're to the end of the evening where we're going to see and hear everybody. And as usual, Megan has thought up a great response for what will be contributing in our, when we all get together at the end, when we promote you to panelists. So if there were to be an oral history on you, what one topic would you like to be included in your oral history?
All right, pause, Laura. We're going to promote everyone.
Okay.
But think about it, folks. We have a stubborn few at the end. I don't know why they don't promote.
Well, we finally got Tom. Okay, we just need Lynn.
And Claire.
I've seen it say that she's being promoted, but.
All right. So Laura, are you going to tell us your story first?
Okay, so I think if I were to be remembered, I would want to be remembered for my backpacking adventures and my struggles keeping my food from the bears, which used to be such a problem. I could tell lots of stories about bears grabbing my backpack and chasing them. And on the same backpacking trip, a marmot stole one of only 2 fish that I have ever caught. And I got lost. And my brother, who was only 16 at the time, dropped his pack off of a cliff. But we did manage to get back to civilization when we were supposed to. So it all ended up good. And that was shortened stories of one backpacking trip. And I have lots more, but we want to keep it short. So I will just start sharing. That will be my contribution. So I've given you time to think about what you would like to be included in your oral histories to be left for everybody after. And I will start by passing it to, well, Tom, right there underneath of me.
After what you said, brought back a memory. I was in college and we went up to San Jacinto, up into the mountains there. It was summertime, but no, it was the wintertime. We went up there on the tram and the lake was frozen. And so all my 3 buddies, they're all like, oh, let's go walk on the lake. So we walked on the lake and they said, well, just keep going farther. So I went out to the middle and they started throwing these big boulders of ice and I could hear that goes boom, boom, like that. And then all of a sudden I looked around and I said, oh, I see some water over here. Oh, there's water over here. And the next thing I know, I went under with my jeans, my boots, my pea coat, everything underneath. I went down and I knew I shouldn't go too far. So I went up to the top and tried to get out. I kept breaking. At that point, I just started using my arms to break the ice until I got to the thick part. They pulled me out. It was like stupid and thrilling.
That's scary. Well, we're glad that you made it.
I made it. That's just one little episodes in my life, but with your camping, that brought up that new memory or old memory. So now let's see, participants. I think I shall send it to Alana.
I was afraid you were going to call on me. When I was a toddler, I got this little bear named Calvin. And I took him everywhere with me, and he now back when we traveled, like he goes on our family vacations with us, and we like buy him little accessories and clothes and stuff. So I feel like if I would just tell the stories of Calvin, and we have pictures and things, so I guess maybe because I'm from a more like digital generation, like I would want to include the pictures in this story as well. But like we have him with like a glass of wine when we're on a trip, so he's like a little member of the family, and it makes it more fun for us on our trips as well, since we like to travel, but it gives it that extra element. And
so Calvin still travels with you?
He does, yes. And he's even traveled with Ron and Leslie without me. So he's really a member of the family. I know he's around here somewhere. Yeah. I took him when I did my study abroad in college. I like took him to Ireland, and it's a conversation starter, you know, being an adult with a little stuffed animal.
You can get through TSA?
Yeah, he's made it. I mean, knock on wood, he's been okay so far. He hasn't accidentally left anything in his pockets or anything like that. Marsha, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I think I would like the Fanny stories with my Model T. There's so many of those, and but I have lots of other ones. But the Model T, the time that I was going to go inside and give a tour when my Model T was parked up front, and they had a security guard from the country club that was supposed to be watching it while I was giving the tour, and he had seen me letting people come on and all that, so he let somebody who was a little bit plump, and the person moved the parking brake forward, and you know the rancho is a hill, so my car went rolling down the hill, and I don't know if Marie's still on, but it wasn't for that tree there, it would have not been a car anymore. But that little dent is still on that car, and I always tell everybody it's a historic dent from the rancho, but that is a story that I like to tell, and a lot of other ones with Fanny, and even the quicksand one. I did a lot of research on that one, so I'll tell you that some other time. But I'm glad I can see people today, and I'm hoping to come back sometime soon. And I'm going to pass it to, let's see, I can see everybody, but Susan looks like a white square. Is Susan there? Susan Mayo? No?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm passing it to you. So you're not developed, your picture's not developed, and you're from a photographic family.
Yeah, thank you ever so much. I was going to say the photography aspect of my life that I've enjoyed, and I'm going through pictures now of my mom and dad's stuff, and it's just really a lot of fun. I'm finding photographs that I didn't even know we had. So, yeah, picture taking. I don't know who to ask for. How about Edith? Is she still there?
Edie?
Now,
She's
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so everybody's talking about all of these great adventures. I used to have a dog who wasn't my dog, but I wound up having him for 22 years. And so we had some fabulous adventures at sea. He would ride on the gas tank of a Harley. He would scout out ahead when we were horseback riding in Montana. One night, I was on the train with Barnum and Bailey's Circus and fell asleep, and someone knocked on the door and said, "We're headed for the Canadian border." So I go to this door and the world is going by. And I said, Knuckles, jump. He just jumped right off, and I was scared, but I just jumped right after him. And then we just followed the railroad tracks back into Butte. And once he broke his back, and he would only walk backwards, except when you took him to the, I mean, there's just a million Knuckles stories. It was like, he was the love of my life. Don't tell Bernie.
All right, who do you want to pass to, Edie?
Who's here? I can't see. Can I see?
Well, you
who's
have
here?
Diana, you have Jean and Gail, you Joyce and Martin.
Oh,
Landis.
how about Martin and Gail?
No, wait. Okay, sorry. Martin just got up and left the room.
So it's you, Joyce.
Okay. Well, Martin and I used to go on these trips for about 20 years with a group of friends, and we watched their kids grow up. You know, we don't have our own kids, so we watched their kids grow up. So we would, usually rent, a large condo or several condos, and we would go skiing every year. So one year there wasn't enough snow, so instead we went from Mammoth to Yosemite, went the back road. And we, I guess there was a frozen lake up there, and we walked on the lake, and it was so wonderful because you could hear the lake making these moaning sounds. So, and we thought it was haunted. We thought, what's going on with this lake? But I guess it just from the vibrations of all the people walking on the lake, it made these moaning noises. So it was like singing to us. So I thought that was a great memory. Anyway. So that's it. So we would go skiing. Let's see, we had lots of accidents skiing, but never got really hurt, but had a good time. Let's see. So what else? Okay, we'll give it to Landis Bell.
Okay, actually this one is for Megan. It's an Army story. I was a staff sergeant in 101st Airborne, and we were doing training jumps. And I was jump master on this one jump. And I had a corporal that went out of the plane, and he got his ripcord tangled up in his weapon. And so he was just sort of hanging out of the back of the airplane, sort of slamming into the fuselage. And so I had to make a decision real quick whether to cut him loose and let him take his emergency parachute, or just see if he's still going to make it down, because we can't land with somebody hanging out of the aircraft. And so I'm looking down, and they're supposed to put a hand over their head like this to show that they're still conscious, but his hand was just sort of flapping around. So I made the decision to cut him, and he just shot away from the airplane and dropped down behind all the other parachutists. And I thought, oh my God, he's gonna go in. But then he pulled his ripcord, and he managed to, his name was Alsop. I remember Corporal Alsop. He managed to pull out about 500 feet over the ground and landed safely. So that's my story.
Exciting.
Dan's in your screen. He gets to share a story too.
Are you going to share, Jan, or are you going to pass it? All right. You have Ina.
I have a dog who's acting up right now.
Yeah.
Okay. You can pass it to Ina, the Dermodies, or Diana.
Diana.
Oh, Diana, sorry.
I'm thinking it's Diana Chang, not Diana Marquez. Hopefully we'll see. Are you able to unmute yourself, Diana? Maybe not. Maybe it is Diana Marquez. Okay. How about the Dermodies? No. No. Okay. Ina.
Can I read myself?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So for years, I was the editor-in-chief at a teacher created resources, and I loved it. And then I retired because it was time. One of the things that always happened is because I was the editor, I worked on everybody else's material and I would see it get published. And it was really wonderful. I loved it. But I knew that I wanted to be on the other side of publishing. And so after I retired, I got involved with, I started writing, and I've been able to get several pieces published in Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I just had something published in Westways. And it just made such a difference in my life to realize that I could be doing both jobs. You know, I didn't know if I could write the way those people wrote, but then I found out that I could, and there was some validation for me. So it made has made retirement very exciting. And I'm saying that because I need a little mental push to make a deadline. It's coming up pretty quick. So yeah, I would say that's what I'd like people to remember about me.
Well, congratulations on those publications. And if you would like to share that link in here for people, but I think we included it in a quick notes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the Dermodies were able to get themselves online. So what do you want to be go down in your oral histories? You're on mute though. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Well, I think a memory I'd like to talk about, because it does involve my dear wife and I. It does. Anyway, just for fun, we went to some meeting. It was in the middle of the 1990s when the rancho was closed down. For the earthquake business, that sort of thing. I didn't know what we were there for, because I didn't know how I could help in any way raise some money on some event they were coming up with. And just out of nowhere, I said, well, we could write a few skits. And since we got the RLC players up and running, maybe about 3 or 4 of them. And we could be a part of the huge amount of entertainment you were going to put on, and so I think I could do that. We could write scripts and get RLC players to do it. And they said, okay, that'd be a good idea. So we're driving home, and here's the great memory for me. I said, well, Gail, we got to get busy and write 3 or 4 scripts and, get everybody organized. She looked at me and said, I'm sorry, I didn't say I was going to do anything. You kept talking about how you were going to do it. So good luck. Well, she ended up helping, of course, and thus began just one phase of the RLC players, because it all managed to come together for us. And that's a very happy memory for both of us, right, Gail?
Yes.
Okay, let's pass it on to someone. I'll let my dear wife pick.
I think, Joyce and Martin. No, we have been.
We had Joyce, but we didn't have Martin. Is Martin wanting to share?
Martin has decided not to return.
Okay, I guess Martin didn't want to share.
No, he doesn't like to share.
We did have someone share on YouTube.
Megan, you haven't gone yet.
Let's have Alana share from YouTube first, and then me, and the last one might be Marie.
Oh, right.
All right, so Sandra is our stalwart YouTube viewer, and she was sharing that she used to visit her grandfather in Mexico, and he would take her to see animals she couldn't see in the States, but he would also tell her about his adventures growing up, and then they would recreate some of those together, and the fond memories and some of the best summers that she's had, as she counted.
Awesome. So I was born in the late 60s, which means I was a kid in the 70s and a teenager in the 80s, and graduated from college in 1989, and then went on a trip to Europe with my cousins. So we spent the summer with a Eurail, no cell phone. I almost gave my mom a heart attack by not calling for a few weeks. But the biggest thing is that we went to Berlin in August of 1989, and we had no clue that we were among the last to go through, or decide not to go through in my case, but my cousin and I split up that day. She went through Checkpoint Charlie, and I went through incredible museums because I'd just taken an art history class. And of course, there are a lot of incredible artistic things in the Berlin museums for reasons that I won't go into, but incredible that we had no idea, 6 weeks later, that wall would come down. And I've always regretted at my ignorance of that. I knew all about apartheid in the 80s. And so I wasn't actually I was delighted, but not all that surprised when that social structure tore asunder right about the same time. But when I went to a museum in DC a few years ago, it's now closed, but they had a piece of the Berlin Wall, and they had all these newscasters, Tom Brokaw and others, saying, "We are shocked. We had no idea." And I felt sort of better that I didn't know. So I was oblivious, but not as oblivious maybe in that particular portion of the world. Anyway, it just blew my mind to be, I don't know, in my early 20s, traveling through, and then just a few weeks or months later, the world changed in so many ways. The Cold War didn't exactly end, but some of the big views of it did. Marie?
I've had so many adventures, it would be hard to decide which one to talk about, but something that Edie sparked when she was sharing the train with the Ringley brothers. When I was a wee small lass, I'm talking under kindergarten, we were living at that time in Eagle Rock, and a circus would come to town every single year. And this circus, it was a brilliant marketing strategy. They would invite the children to be part of the show, which of course meant that the parents would pay to bring the rest of the kids to come see the show. Somehow I was selected to get to participate, and my sisters had been, my older sisters had often been in there, had often participated. But the year I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and they dressed me up in a little red, me in red, but a red cowgirl hat, complete with hat. And I got to ride an elephant. Not only did I get to ride an elephant, but his trunk would come up and he would scoop up this little, and I'm talking little tiny 3 or 4 year old, and he would hold her in his trunk and he would put me on the ground, and then he would go ta-da. And many, many lifetimes later, I was working at the Rancho, and I had a volunteer come through, and she was wearing a really handsome bracelet. And I said, "What a stunning bracelet. What is that?" She goes, "Guess." Everybody guesses, and nobody ever gets it right. And I said, "May I touch it?" And she said, "Yes." And I touched it. I said, "Elephant hair." And she goes, "You are the only person in the world who's ever gotten it right. How did you know this was elephant hair?" But that is how I knew. It's because I've actually ridden an elephant and been in an elephant's trunk. So as a funny, just humorous thing, trying to tie one of my adventures back to the Rancho, that is the one I would share. And I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Laura, you're on.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for sharing that. And that was a lot of fun. Just want to remind everybody about volunteer opportunities coming up. There's gardening every Tuesday morning, 8 to noon. Garden crafts the first Friday of each month. Hopefully you're going to be making some soap because we're all out. And starting next Wednesday, garden docent training. We still have room if people want to take it. Curatorial work days, they've been on Thursdays, but that's probably going to be changing now that we have a new curator. So keep your eyes on Quick Notes to see what that schedule is going to be. We're still in need of public hours volunteers, especially house docents and garden docents. But tomorrow we have an opening for just a non-trained public hours volunteer. So please take a look at Go on Volgistics and see if there's any shifts you can fill. If anybody would like to be a story time reader, we are having a great turnout, not too many, around 20 with the kids and the family. They're very well behaved and it's a very nice setting. So come and observe our wonderful storytellers, Michelle and Nancy, but I think they'd probably be willing to share if somebody else wants to give it a whirl. And put on your calendar next month, September 21st, our long postponed volunteer appreciation dinner where we'll be recognizing everybody's service from 2019 and 2020, finally. Yay, I can't wait. And I think that's about it. Thank you all for coming and contributing. It was great seeing everybody. Adios.